What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the Diesel Podcast. Really excited. Today's episode came from Diesel Nation. You guys had asked a few months back for us to have Shell to come on the podcast. We're lucky enough to be able to join by Karen from Shell, and she's going to talk to us about Rotella. There's a ton of questions that have been put together from you guys, from our audience. A lot of them come from Discord, and I want to encourage you guys, if you're not on there, you're going to find a link down below. You're going to see it on the screen to be able to join. It's a great way to be able to engage with us, other podcast listeners, talk about your trucks, episode suggestions. So the bulk of this podcast comes from you guys. We're going to go through what Rotella is, the different types of applications that it has, not just for your trucks, but also for equipment that you may have, and just learn a little bit more about the different classifications, the different specifications that Shell has for older trucks, newer trucks, and get a great overview of the product line. So we appreciate their time joining us today. Want to encourage you guys as well that if you want more information from the podcast, you want to be an executive producer for an episode, you'd like your truck to be a podcast, our podcast cover, we're going to have a link down below as well for our Patreon. It's another way that you can support us, help us grow into 2022. It's going to be our 6th year doing the podcast, and we're really appreciative of all your support over the years that you guys listening on YouTube, podcast apps, our apps, sending us emails with show suggestions, or just asking for our opinions on what transmission to buy, where should you get a reman engine, advice for builds, things like that. I love hearing from you guys. All right, let's get to today's episode with Karen from Shell and learning more about Rotella. Karen, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I'm excited to chat with you today. I always love talking about oil and diesel trucks, and it's a very important topic that I know a lot of truck owners pay attention to, whether they've had the truck for 10 or 15 years or they just bought a brand new one this year and they're thinking, hey, I'm coming up on that first oil change. What should I run? So we appreciate you being here today and taking time to educate us on oil and then answer some questions from our listeners.
Okay, thanks. I'm Karen Howman. I'm an OEM technical manager for Rotella Shell, and I manage the technology for the Rotella line of engine oils. And we've got a wide range of products. Rotella is the leading diesel engine oil in the industry, and we've got a wide range of products from conventional engine oils up through synthetic blends and synthetics. So something to meet everybody's needs depending on what they're trying to accomplish and what type of engine they have.
I know one of our listeners definitely had a question about conventional versus synthetic, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. But I wanted to ask you, as far as people who have a diesel truck, they tend to kind of fall into two different camps. Those that own a pre-2007 truck, which had emissions systems on them in some form or another, most of them, and then ones after 2007. So with the Rotella line, are there two different or multiple different products that apply to a year range, and then also, say one towards the newer trucks?
Yeah, no, there's not. So the industry has a set of minimum specifications that all engine oils fall under, and that set of specification changes over time. So the pre-2007 would have been when we were in what we call API CJ4 kind of performance standard. And as we progressed in 2016 to the CK4, we increased the standards for engine oil performance in the industry in general, which Rotella meets and exceeds always. And the industry works very hard when we upgrade a specification to make sure that we maintain backward compatibility so that we have all of the same requirements that are met of the previous category included in the new category, and then there'll be some increases in performance. So when engine oil improves over time, we go to great lengths to make sure that it's backward compatible.
Perfect.
So there's no particular product that you should be seeking for any specific model year.
That makes it really easy. I know when I've gone to the local auto parts store and I look at the shelf, and one of the first things I think we do as a diesel truck owner is we look at the back and think, okay, does this meet what's listed in my manual for my truck? And that can be such a confusing process, especially for a newer, diesel owner. To really jump kind of more in depth with the Rotella line is what are some of the benefits? What are some of the things that you guys have engineered into it to be able to help these trucks live, to be efficient, to be able to keep these engines running as long as possible?
So Rotella always has focused on having just a really strong, robust additive system. The things that we focus on most are anti-wear protection and engine cleanliness. So if you follow your engine manufacturer's oil drain intervals, that plays a key part too. And back to the point of the pre-2007, actually, if your engine was developed on a previous standard of engine oil and then the engine oil performance has increased, you're actually benefiting from that because you have a higher quality engine oil than when the oil drain intervals were set and when those standards for that engine were designed. So we always are ahead of the industry in engine cleanliness, which is a priority, and protection against wear.
And with the wear part, I've had a lot of guests on, specifically engine builders, that talk about the importance of oil and things that they see on failed engines. That someone will call in and say, my engine failed, and they tear it apart, and there's just massive amounts of wear. So I know that's going to definitely resonate with people who are listening. Is that wear something that can happen, say, on a cold start, and then also under hard use situations like towing or kind of higher temperatures that the engine's experiencing? Is that where the anti-wear is focused?
It is. So you want to make sure that you're using the proper viscosity grade of engine oil. So if you're operating in a cold climate, you want to make sure that you're using the appropriate viscosity grade, so you've got good cold temperature startup, so that you've got oil to critical engine parts on startup. So cold flow properties and pumpability are important on the cold side. On the hot side, our additives that we use are primarily temperature activated. So the higher the temperature, that's what activates the additive to activate on the surfaces to protect against wear.
That's going to be incredibly important, especially on the newer trucks, which tend to run a bit warmer due to the regen process. Mm-hmm. Is we're always thinking about heat, and we talk about a lot on the podcast. We see a lot of different places as heat is the enemy of the engine. So anything you can do to be able to help with that and protect the internal workings of an engine, they are incredibly important. With the detergents, I wanted to ask you about that. Is I know there's probably going to be someone listening who is brand new, just bought their 2022 truck or 2021, and they're thinking, what exactly does that mean? What does my engine need to be cleaned from? What is contaminating it from the outside in that the oil can help with that?
It's not so much from the outside in. The detergents protect against acids that build up from combustion byproducts. So those acids can deteriorate your oil. They can contribute to piston deposits that end up with, basically your engine parts becoming dirty. They can also contribute to sludge buildup. So the detergents basically help to break down those acids that come from the combustion process and keep your engine clean.
And with like the sludge and some of the things you mentioned there, do you guys see or hear, as far as what that can do to an engine? Is it something that just slowly over time can lower the longevity of it, or can that cause a catastrophic failure if there's, an excess buildup of that? What exactly happens with an engine when it's not clean?
One of the big problems with piston deposits, so you'll have a carbon buildup on the piston, and you can even have it become so thick that it can cover over the ring, and then the ring won't seal, so that you'll have excessive blow-by, you'll have excessive oil consumption because the oil is getting past the rings. So keeping the pistons clean and the rings clean allows that mechanism, that power unit, to be able to operate properly, the ring to turn as it's supposed to turn and to seal properly. Also, sludging is an important issue too. If your engine oil sludges up in the engine, you won't have the proper flow and oil film thickness in the parts of the engine.
I think of maintenance. The first thing I think of is oil and filter changes and how crucial they are. And there's so many stories of, people are using these trucks day in and day out all the time where they have the repair for something that's damaged pertaining to an engine can be so expensive, but when you compare it to the cost of using a quality oil, changing the filter, staying on top of the maintenance schedule, it definitely lowers the operating costs and potential that could be there with a major engine failure.
Yeah, absolutely. And performance, in the meantime. So certainly worth a high quality engine oil.
It definitely is. There's some really great questions we had gotten from our audience, and I wanted to ask them to you. And the first one we touched on a little bit in the beginning of the podcast about conventional versus synthetic. And I think this person is asking from the perspective of they've had a truck for a while and they've always run conventional. Mm-hmm. And they had asked, is there a point where synthetic isn't beneficial compared to a conventional oil?
Synthetic oils are just a higher quality base oil. So when you hear a synthetic oil, it's the type of base oil that we use, and it's just a more highly refined product. So as you know, engine oils get thinner at hot temperatures and thicker at colder temperatures. And synthetic oils are more temperature stable. They have what we call a higher viscosity index. So they don't get as thin at hot temperatures. So you'll have better protection when the temperatures are hot. We were talking about that earlier. You also don't get as much thickening at cold temperatures. So you have better cold flow properties, better cold flow. So synthetic base oils, they also have a higher ability to resist oxidation. So they last longer. So basically, synthetic engine oils are just better quality base oil based products that are a better quality in general.
So if somebody had a truck with 130,000 miles or 180 and they had always run conventional, they could make the switch then to a synthetic and have those extra benefits to it.
Absolutely. They're compatible. Conventional and synthetic are compatible, and that's where we have synthetic blends are popular in the market today. It's a combination of a conventional base oil combined with a synthetic.
The next question we had was, what's the max operating temperatures before thermal breakdown between synthetic and conventional?
Okay, well, we don't think of thermal breakdown as a point in time. So thermal breakdown, I guess you could be thinking about deterioration over the oil from temperature over time. So it's a process. Primarily what happens with high temperatures is the oil starts to oxidize. And it at a certain point can even start to thicken. We call it oxidative thickening, where the viscosity will increase. Synthetic base oils, synthetic oils have better oxidation stability. And so that's one of the reasons why they typically last longer. So we test our oils for oxidation performance as part of the industry specification. And that test runs, just to kind of put things into context, it runs the oil at 130 degrees C, which is about 265 degrees F, for 360 hours consecutively. And then we determine what the rate of oxidation is at the end of that test. So, just to kind of put it into perspective, for you to have 360 hours at over 165 degrees C, 265 degree F, you couldn't do that within one oil change. So pretty much, our oils are formulated to resist any of the temperatures that you're going to see in the engine for the period of time that you'll see it without deteriorating through some kind of thermal breakdown.
That's a really great answer, because I know that the thought that is out there, can be out there in the public, is if I hit this certain temperature, for a short amount of time, I've broken the oil down. So to know that it's tested for that long amount of a time before that takes place, I think is really important to the people who are towing with these trucks and using them on the construction sites and hauling things. And they really tend to focus on that part of it. So
I get that question a lot. What's the max temperature? And, we just don't have an answer to that, because we don't test an oil to failure. We have a set of tests that have parameters, time and temperature and that type of thing. And we run the oil and then we take performance measurements, but we don't continue to run it until there's a failure. You can see formulations fail the test, and then you go back to the drawing board and you reformulate until you can get acceptable for performance. But there's no, single temperature to answer that question. But we can just say that, oils in general in the market are designed to withstand some pretty severe temperatures for pretty long time. You can also use the rule of thumb that a synthetic oil is going to have better temperature performance, better temperature resistance, both high and low temperatures. So if you're in an extreme condition like towing, you keep that in mind.
It's one of the really tough parts when I got involved in the industry was I found out quickly that people like to have just a quick answer that kind of fits everything. And you think of, somebody who's hot-shotting and towing a ton of weight from one end of the country to the other versus, say, the race side of it, where people are pushing these trucks to incredible speeds just for a few seconds at a time. It's so hard to just have one quick and easy answer, right. Especially for temperatures. We had another question, and they had asked, is it a myth high zinc content in oil is detrimental to emissions equipment?
Okay, so this is another one that falls into the category of not so much a quick and easy answer. I would say it's a myth. There is an issue with additives, zinc in particular, being deposited on DPF. And your DPF accumulation of ash is a function of oil consumption control. So if oil gets past the rings and gets into the combustion chamber, the oil hydrocarbon part will burn off, but the inorganic additives that we use, like zinc in particular, will not fully combust, and it forms an ash that enters the exhaust stream and gets carried through and will deposit onto your DPF. So it's kind of a paradox because zinc is also a critical additive that we use to protect against engine wear, which limits your oil consumption. And so it's a bit paradoxical that the additive that you don't want deposited on your DPF actually protects you against having oil components deposited on your DPF. So it's back to the using a robust, high quality engine oil that protects against piston deposits. We talked about that earlier, that can cause oil consumption. And obviously ring and liner wear can contribute to oil being consumed. So, theoretically you could formulate an oil that had no zinc, but you wouldn't really be benefiting from saving your DPF at the expense of your engine.
I think there's that question, and I'm just taking a guess here. I think it comes from the, say, lack of knowledge that the general person, including myself, may not know about oils. And we look at the back of the bottle to see, does this meet this standard for my newer truck, or will this work on my 1998 12 valve? And if I have a newer one and I put the wrong oil in, am I going to clog my DPF or see regens increase or get into something that's a very expensive fix? So going back to what you said about being able or having formulated the Rotella oil product to be able to work on an older or newer truck takes so much of that guesswork and the fear that we have as a truck owner of, am I going to have to go buy a $4,000 DPF because I didn't put the right oil in my truck? I don't have to worry about that. And that's something that I think is incredibly refreshing about staying on top of maintenance and doing our oil changes, is knowing that it'll work on this newer truck that I have.
Yeah, so the engine manufacturers and the oil industry work together, work very hard to make sure that there's not misapplication, that oils in all of the oils in the market are compatible with after treatment systems. The current industry specification does limit the amount of ash that we can put in the oil for that reason. We go through great lengths to work with OEMs on what the oil quality should be, what the formulation should be, and then what the communication is to the customer. So all of our Rotella line, we all meet the current API CK4 category. So with respect to after treatment compatibility and that type of thing, you really can't pick a wrong oil. They're all formulated to be compatible with those after treatment systems, regardless of what model year you have. So you don't have to worry about misapplication. I think the most important part, like you said, is keeping the maintenance and the drain intervals, and then just following the recommendation for the proper viscosity grade based on your engine and your and the ambient temperatures.
It was actually the next question we had. It segued really well into that. Is someone had asked, are there different oil weights, and which should I use? Cold weather versus warmer climates, cold start protection, and I'm sure there's going to be several different answers depending on the engine that it is and the climate, but that is a common question that we see.
Yeah, that's right. So viscosity grades are designed to operate efficiently under different ambient temperatures and different operating conditions. So the first number with the W that would be your cold temperature viscosity performance, and then the second number is your high temperature performance. So first thing I would always recommend is to look at your manual, and typically it will say use X viscosity grade, or it'll give a range of temperatures and say you can use a 15W40, or if your ambient temperatures are between X and Y, you can use a 10W30, and they'll give you multiple choices depending on what is most appropriate for your environment. Sometimes they're referred to as a summer grade and a winter grade. So most, if not all, of the OEMs will have multiple recommendations and give you ranges of temperatures to follow to be able to pick the appropriate viscosity grade.
The last question that we got, well, there were actually a ton of them, but I knew we would probably have a 2 or 3 or 5 hour podcast, and so I had to pick some of the common ones. Was, are oil additives, do they vary between a diesel and a gas engine?
They do. Diesel engine oils typically have between 20 and 25% of the product is additives, where gasoline is more 10 to 15%. Diesel engine oil additives have much higher treat rates of dispersant because of the soot generated in the oil that you don't have in a gasoline engine. And they also have significantly higher levels of anti-wear, just because of the differences in the engine and the higher loads and the higher temperatures and demands on the diesel engine. So definitely totally different products, diesel and gasoline. We do have some formulations that are suitable for both, light duty diesels and gasoline. But typically they are considerably different.
I just thought of a question, and I'm thinking of a lot of the fans that we have, the people that ask these questions, and I know industries they're in, they also use diesel equipment or tractors, it's different things, whether it's on a farm or industrial. Does the Rotella line, how much does it vary, if at all, to someone who's listening right now and they've got a John Deere tractor, or they've got an International or something else that they're using in addition to their Duramax or Cummins or Power Stroke? What kind of products do you have for the more like heavy duty farm equipment, tractor, industrial applications?
So the current industry heavy duty spec API CK4 diesel engine oil specification handles both on a highway and off highway. So it's the same. It's the same set of products. It's the same category, performance category. So the on-highway and the off-highway for diesel, and our diesel engine oils can go anywhere from a diesel pickup truck all the way up to a Class 8, and then off-highway and even construction applications. So a diesel engine will use any one of the Rotella diesel oils. And back to what we were talking about earlier about compatibility and misapplication. The industry spec is designed to be able to accommodate the needs for all of those applications. So you're really not prone to misapplication outside of say choosing the wrong viscosity grade.
I love how how simplified it seems to be, because it's always been something to me that I always, for whatever reason, always thought, well, there's a different kind of oil for, my truck, and then for this equipment, it's going to be totally different. So I think to be able to understand that, hey, there's a standard that's set and this product meets it, and I can run it in these different applications, especially I imagine for fleets, it's something that's very streamlined with that whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are reasons to choose different engine oils. If you want maximum protection, if you've got high temperatures or, extreme operating conditions where you're towing across the country, you probably lean towards a 15W40. And then we were talking earlier about synthetic versus conventional. So if you want to stay in the 15W40 range, you could use a Rotella T5 15W40, which is a synthetic blend. But if you were in a little colder temperatures, you might want to go with the T6 15W40, which is a full synthetic. So, there are subtleties and there are benefits that you can get from choosing different oils, but you really don't have that fear of misapplication, the way that the specifications are designed to kind of, blanket protect, every application with the minimum performance requirements.
Now, for anyone who's listening, they want to learn more. Is there a place they can go on the Shell website to be able to read on their own, maybe watch videos, learn more about the different, conventional, the synthetic, and just be able to educate themselves more before they make that decision of, I'm going to run this in my fleet, or I'm going to run this in my truck, or I'm going to run this type of oil in my equipment?
Yeah, absolutely. The Rotella.com website has all of our products and a breakdown of all of the different benefits. I would recommend that your listeners check out that website and kind of see the different products and the different benefits. There's other things that we didn't quite touch on, like fuel economy, and we have products that can help get better fuel economy if that's something that you're trying to achieve. We even offer a limited engine warranty for our customers, and that's on the website also that people can check out.
That's really interesting. I didn't think to ask that, but could you give just a brief kind of rundown of what that warranty would be that you had just mentioned for your customers?
Yeah, it's in the process of changing, so I don't want to go into the details. You could go to rotella.com/warranty, but I can tell you at a high level, it's a limited warranty that protects against engine failure that's related to lubricating parts. And it goes, like I said, it's changing. It goes up to 300,000 miles with one product and even higher. It depends on which product you're using. So the warranty is something that you can enroll in, and you upload your receipts. You can even, do it yourself oil changes. That applies too. All the details are on the rotella.com/warranty. I encourage your listeners to check that out.
Definitely. I'll make sure and put a link for our YouTube audience down below and make sure and direct them there. And I appreciate your time today chatting and answering these questions that our audience had, that I had, helping us learn more about how Rotella can protect our trucks, our equipment, and the things that we're using to work and, sustain what we do. So I appreciate your time and the expertise you provided.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
Don't forget, Diesel fans, make sure and head on over to our Discord app. You'll find a link down below. I want to see you guys over there. We've grown a ton since we started it. We're, our immediate goal when we started was just to have 100 people on there. Now we're approaching 400 pretty quickly, and it's a really cool place. I love seeing what you guys are working on. And for those that want even more information, want to be involved in the podcast as, an executive producer, have your truck be the podcast cover, there's a link down below for our Patreon as well. And I want to give a shout out to a couple of them, which is Texas Diesel Supply and Wrights Diesel Services. We appreciate their support and all of your support. All of you that subscribe, listen, download, engage with us, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, the Discord app, YouTube, comment on our videos. Everyone who participates in the Diesel podcast and gives us great information, great ideas for shows. We appreciate you and look forward to bringing even more great content to you in 2022. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.